the opposition has come out with their guns blazing. The international community is going to be looking closely. Now, what has happened today that has led everyone to focus on India again and developments and goings on here? Viewers, the British Broadcasting Corporation was surveyed today. The word survey is a euphemism for raid. Taxmen showed up simultaneously at the BBC's offices in Delhi and Mumbai. This is, of course, not the first time that the BBC has been surveyed. Under the UPA, taxmen landed up twice. Under Vajpayee's regime, NDA won. The BBC's books were examined once. But thus far, the surveys or the raids, call them what you want to, have yielded nothing. The courts, in fact, have on 2 occasions come to the BBC's rescue. So why under Modi's government, when there are so many precedents, why under Modi's government have the surveys, these twin surveys at 2 different locations, attracted so much controversy? Perhaps because some people allude to the timing. Just a few weeks ago, the BBC and the NDA government, along with its political swords arm, the Bharatiya Janata Party, were at each other's throats over a docu-series called India, the Modi Question. The BBC, in its documentary, implied that the film proves that Prime Minister Modi has a deep antipathy towards Muslims and has a lot to answer for in connection with the Gujarat riots of 2002. In response, of course, the Modi regime has dismissed the film as, and I quote them, hostile propaganda and anti-India garbage, unquote. For good measure, the government has even called on social media platforms to block the BBC from screening the film in India or disseminating it on the web. Viewers, were the surveys, as the opposition insists, the result of vengefulness, revenge for the negative, some people say, hit job on Modi? Now, we'll debate that a little later, viewers, in the show. But first, here's what we knew from the information that we have gleaned today. Income Tax Department sources have told Times Now that the surveys of the BBC were conducted because the IT authorities suspect tax evasion in international taxation and transfer pricing irregularities. In fact, the sources referred to alleged persistent and deliberate violation of norms and non-compliance by BBC for years. They allege that they have collected digital data and even seized the phones of BBC employees. Now, here's a glimpse of what transpired today. Watch this quick report.
It's little over 10 a.m. and behind me there were several IT sleuths entering this building, knocking at BBC's door here at KG Marg in New Delhi.
The Mumbai unit has reportedly roped in other departments as well. The Income Tax Department maintains that these are not raids or searches, but the survey conducted to look into the alleged tax evasion on part of BBC.
Highly placed sources in Income Tax Department have told Times Now that BBC in India have been defiant and non-compliant to summons that have been issued earlier and diverting a significant amount of their profit. And that's the reason why these surveys are being carried out today.
It's close to 11:30 a.m. and the action has begun to unfold at the BBC office here in Mumbai. Reportedly, the income tax officials have also switched off the mobile phones of the staff members present inside the BBC office, and also the collection of their digital data has also been started with regards to the commercial purpose used for the BBC News.
This has had a massive political storm, with the opposition calling it as a predictable action, a sign of panic and a dictatorial move.
Well, on its part, the BBC says that they are cooperating with the IT authorities and hope that the situation is resolved soon. The BBC put out a short, succinct statement for the world to see. Now, viewers, let's for a moment focus on what the government has said in its response and the BJP to the claim that this entire survey reeks of vengefulness. Now, Mahua Moitra, for example, the TMC leader said raids at BBC but VIP treatment for Adani. Congress said this is an undeclared emergency. Jairam Ramesh says must act against Adani, but government behind the BBC. And there have been several of these responses. So the Union Home Minister talked about the BBC today and felt that they are actually militantly opposed to the Prime Minister. And other BJP spokesperson viewers also came out with their guns blazing. Listen in.
यहाँ हम जेपीसी की मांग कर रहे हैं अडानी के मामले में और वहाँ सरकार बीबीसी के पीछे पड़ी हुई है। विनाशकाले विपरीत बुद्धी।
बीबीसीच्या कार्यालयावरती दिल्लीमध्ये धाड पडलेली आहे, धाड टाकलेली आहे। एखाद्या प्रसार माध्यमाच्या कार्यालयावरती धाड टाकणं हे कोणत्या लोकशाहीत बसतं? म्हणजेच काय की तुम्ही आम्ही वाटेल ते करू पण तुम्ही आवाज नाही उठवायचा। जर आवाज उठवाल तर चिरडून टाकू। ही जी एक पाशवी वृत्ती आपल्या देशामध्ये आज फोफावायला बघते ती आपण वेळेमध्ये एकत्र आलो नाही आणि आपली ताकद वाढवली नाही तर उद्या संपूर्ण देश खाऊन टाकेल।
देखिए सत्य जो होता है इस पर 1000 कॉन्स्पिरेसी कर लो कुछ नहीं होता है। वो करोड़ों सूर्य की भांति तेजस्वी बनकर ही बाहर आता है। ये तो मोदी जी के पीछे 2002 से कर रहे हैं और हर बार मोदी जी मजबूत होकर सच्चे बनकर और जनता की ज्यादा लोकप्रियता हासिल कर बाहर आए हैं।
अगर कुछ गलत किया नहीं है, कानून का पालन किया है, तो फिर डर कैसा? बीबीसी के अगर कृत्य देखें तो यह पूरे विश्व की सबसे भ्रष्ट बकवास कॉरपोरेशन हो गई है। और दुख की बात यह है कि बीबीसी का प्रोपेगेंडा और कांग्रेस का एजेंडा एक साथ मेल खाता है। और यह कहना गलत नहीं है। क्यों ऐसा होता है कि कांग्रेस का हाथ देश विरोधियों के साथ?
I think the opposition is acting very prematurely because they do not know the reason why. They're just putting two and two together and making it a political issue. Fact of the matter is the IT before it conducts it.
Now let's put this all in perspective for you viewers. Similar notices were sent to the BBC by the UPA and they justified the surveys then. Here are some hard facts and they're on your screens. Viewers, in 2009, IT notice was sent to the BBC related to tax reassessments from 2002-03. That was under the Vajpayee era. They were quashed by Delhi High Court in March 2016. So this all happened, these raids or notices that were sent rather, happened under the UPA. IT notice in 2010 was also sent to the BBC. Again, Congress government related to tax reassessment from 2003-04. Quashed by Delhi High Court in February 2014. Now, viewers, for decades also the opposition, especially the Congress, has been at loggerheads with the BBC for allegedly doing notoriously, as they call them, anti-India stories. Incidentally, the same accusation is being made against the BBC by the NDA, the Modi NDA today. Now, let's take you back. BBC was expelled from India during the emergency. That was in 1975. In 1970-72, BBC banned after Calcutta and Phantom India. Films caused outrage for prejudicial and negative depictions of the country. Both films were banned and BBC expelled from India till 1972. 2015, BBC's India's Daughter banned. This was in 2015, as I said, ban on commercial release of film on the 2012 Delhi gang rape. Also, 2023, BBC docuseries now has been banned. This one on Modi. So is there truth, viewers? All of this paranoia, is it? Or is there some amount of genuine misgiving based on certain facts? Consistencies, even those Indians, and I have to say there are quite a majority of those Indians who tend to be a little enamored by institutions of the West and therefore tend to give them a wide berth, will perhaps admit that the BBC has employed double standards in its coverage of India. And let me walk you through some of these instances. Now, viewers, Burhan Wani, the terrorist, was referred to as a militant, driven to militancy at the age of 15 after suffering state oppression for no reason. That Three words for no reason should be the ones that should be put in the quotations, because viewers, that was what was emphasized in the article that emerged. And on the other side, the BBC headline, recent headline, says how Sweden became an exporter of jihad, condemning minorities in Sweden, mostly Muslims, as jihadists, viewers. So in Sweden, Muslim immigrants, those who have settled, are jihadis, but in Kashmir, they are victims of state oppression that were forced to pick up the gun. Viewers, let's look at other examples. Let me run you by this second plate. In 2021, BBC headline, can Pak protect its religious minorities? So wide berth, the question mark is put there. Is there really a problem? Are Hindus really being killed? And if so, can they be protected? Charitable. In 2019, BBC headline read, are India's claims on minorities being persecuted in other nations true? To almost extinction in Pakistan. Or even in some now instances in Bangladesh, increasingly there are attacks on minorities there. Now look at BBC's style guide, viewers, the third instant, 1988 style guide. It refers to IRA as terrorist, viewers. The style guide, however, when it applies to India, refers to Hizbul Mujahideen and Lashkar-e-Toiba as Pak-based militant groups. So when British lives are being exterminated, the Irish Republican Army is a terrorist organization. But when, unfortunately, brown lives, viewers, in India are being snuffed out, Hindu lives in particular, by Islamist terror, the perpetrators are just militants. You know, some form of extremists. Now let's open this up, viewers, for some conversations. We have with us Mahesh Jethmalani. I'll just go across to him, but let me quickly introduce our other guest, Haras Rafiq, former advisor to the UK government. He has some very stern views on the BBC, and he's going to tell us a few things about how they work. Sanju Verma, Aarti Tikku, Tushar Gupta, Sanjay Jha, Ashutosh Ji, Vivek Bansal, none of these individuals require introduction, but let's go across to another individual who has sparked really the outrage in India, so to speak, against the BBC. Let's go straight across to him. Well, viewers, here we are with Mahesh Jethmalani, the Bharatiya Janata Party MP, Rajya Sabha, and someone who, of course, has targeted the BBC earlier. Now, Mr. Jethmalani, a couple of questions. Come right on the back of this BBC series. It appears that this is a knee-jerk reaction. Someone has unleashed the Rottweilers. How do you answer to this charge?
Well, I mean, you know, that's a bit of a wild statement. I don't know if it's backed up with any evidence. It's true that it's come post the BBC documentary, but the prelude to that BBC documentary and the aftermath as well was that sufficient a large amount of funding which the BBC was receiving, and it's been receiving it because it was desperate for money. It had gone almost broke, and it received a lot of funding overseas through an overseas organization called Storyworks, an entity controlled by it, from the Chinese state-owned companies such as Huawei and a host of others. Not only that, if you recall in the past, it's also out in the public domain that the employees' pension funds of the BBC, almost 150 million pounds, if not more, but at least 150 million pounds, had been invested in Huawei and other Chinese state-owned companies. So there was, this basically was put a cloud over the BBC's motivations behind releasing of that documentary, particularly since the BBC documentary had ignored the fact, it was arrogant enough to attribute itself as the repository of truth when the Supreme Court had made a searching inquiry Right? And before that, an SIT investigation team had scrutinized the entire evidence relating to the Gujarat riots, and particularly the role of Prime Minister or then Chief Minister Modi in the matter, and had given him a clean chit. So if anybody is suspect in this, it's the BBC. And because of the overseas Chinese funding and Chinese investments by the BBC of pension funds in Chinese state-owned entities, obviously the BBC has come under financial scrutiny. That how are its activities in India being funded? All right. Now I don't know what the basis is. I mean, I have no idea as to why IT has opened up what they call a survey. They've initiated a survey. Right?
Okay, but typically,
which is a pretty comprehensive search into BBC's activities here, right?
Okay,
Yes.
but typically, this is more on transfer pricing and tax evasion across jurisdictions, geographies. Now, clearly,
yes,
this would have been monitored for a significant amount of time, as I said. And now suddenly, after you make these allegations, and then, of course, the series debuts in Britain and is blocked here in India, you have action. Now, I'll just jog your memory back to when Tehelka was raided by agencies after its expose on Bangaru Lakshman in Operation West End. Outlook was raided by agencies after its stories on Ranjan Bhattacharya. This all happened, of course, in NDA 1 or the Vajpayee NDA. Dainik Bhaskar was recently raided a couple of years ago because it did some critical stories against the government during the COVID times. And we also have seen the UPA doing so. So at every stage, the courts, however, have come out and either ruled in favor of those that have been raided or surveyed, including the BBC. So why should we assume that this is not yet another fishing expedition?
Well, nobody would ask anybody to assume that, right? But I don't know. I don't know what IT's official. I'm told they've come out with a statement as to what an official statement as to what the scope of their survey is. But irrespective of that, right? Why jump to conclusions about IT motivations? I mean, wait and see what IT comes up with. If this is just an empty raid or an empty survey, right, without any basis and it throws up nothing, then of course you can, scream murder against the IT department. But at the moment, we have to presume the constitutionality and legality of departmental actions.
So you're saying that the opposition.
And there is no doubt that there is Chinese. Yes.
Okay, so you're saying, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but are you suggesting then that the opposition's alacrity is in some ways a knee-jerk, reflexive hate for Mr. Modi translating into support for the BBC, and they never applied these yardsticks to themselves when they were investigating the BBC? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I would put it a little more mildly. The opposition has a visceral dislike for Prime Minister Modi, right? And it is quite likely that is one of the main reasons that motivated them to make this wild allegation against the IT department. If not a wild allegation, at least an unjustified allegation, a premature allegation at this stage.
Okay, well, let's open this up further. Thank you, Mr. Jethmalani, for joining us. You've set the contours for this conversation that is going to follow tonight. Thank you very much.